Hi, I'm Duncan McLeod of Blackheath Products. Later in this video we're going to our workshop to show you how to install a solid surface material called Mirostone. Mirostone is a durable, waterproof, hygienic and easy to use work surface, perfect for use in kitchens, utility rooms and bathrooms. It has 17 decals to choose from. As a trained installer, there's no need to create templated dimensions for factory production because Mirostone can be machined on site using standard woodworking tools, which saves a huge amount of time and cost. All Mirostone joints can be fabricated seamlessly, giving a solid looking installation and a completely hygienic surface. Undermount sinks can be installed seamlessly, or you could install an inset sink. And drainer grooves can be routed into the surface. Corners can be shaped easily without need for edging, and upstands and splashbacks are also available for seamless installation. So, now let's go to our workshop for a detailed and practical guide for all the Mirostone installation techniques.
Mirostone comes in a 3 metre blank. It's a heavy product. As a 3 metre by 650, it weighs 74 kilos. It's a 2-man lift, and whilst being carried, it must be carried on edge. Once you've opened the Mirostone packaging, you'll find on the underside of the surface some very important information. Firstly, the Mirostone name, followed by, in this instance, Lavina, which is the name of the decor. The size, 3 metre by 650 by 20 mil, and then the most important section to that is the batch number. It's important that if you've got multiple tops in use, that you check this batch number against all tops before you start to machine. They must match. Also included within the packaging, you'll find the installation instructions. All Mirostone surfaces on delivery, you'll find have a protective coating on the face of them. The important part with this is that we remove that protective coating prior to starting any machining. Simply do that just by pulling away in one stretch. What this will reveal is the surface itself, which on delivery to you, that's finished at a 600 grit sand, which is a little bit higher than we actually want it to be finished. We would recommend finishing at 500 on site, which you'll see in other videos as we take that down to the finished level of 500. So here we're just going to cut the Mirostone sheet to the length that we require. To do this, we've set it up with a guide rail across the surface itself, and we're using a plunge saw with a fine tooth blade. Important part of this is we're connected to extraction, and we recommend the use of an M-class extractor. But also you should be wearing the appropriate PPE to keep you safe and away from the dust. In passing through this, we'll do it in 3 cuts, increasing the depth of the cut on each one. So there, we've finished the cut. We went through in 3 passes. It's been fully supported throughout, so that simply pulls away now and leaves us with a nice clean cut. So we finished the cut using the plunge saw. With that cut we took it so it was about 1.5 mm away from where we actually want the true finished edge. So to give that a much smoother finish now, we're just going to trim it with the router. In this instance we need a curve coming onto this corner as well. So we've set the template up so it follows the edge, goes onto the corner, and we're now following that template with a router cutter with a top bearing on it. That's the cut with the router, which gives us a nice clean edge. It's followed round onto the curve, back onto that front edge. All that remains to be done with that now is for that simply to be sanded to bring it into the same level as the surfaces on the top. That process we'll be showing as we go through the video. We're now going to position a stainless steel undermount sink. For this one we're using a half bowl from the River collection. The River collection of sinks and taps has a vast range of undermounted stainless steel, ceramics and acrylic sinks. Each of those sinks is available with a jig, which makes life so much easier. In this instance we're going to use the jig with a router. The router has got the guide bush coming in on the inside of it, so it will actually offset from there about 8 mm across from the edge of the template. That means we won't see as much of the stainless steel on the top edge of the sink. If your customer wanted to see more of the stainless steel, the method of doing that would simply be to drill a hole through the top surface and use a jigsaw about 6 mm away from the final cutout. Once you've done that, you would use a router cutter with a top bearing on it. That top bearing sits onto the inside of the template and simply follows it round. And in doing that, you end up with a cutout that's exactly the size of the template, and you would then see more of the stainless steel on the top edge of it. The method that we're going to use is with the router, with the guide push coming onto the inside, and that will set it further away and we'll see less steel. So we've used the router for the first pass, and as you can see here we've gone into the depth of the Mirostone by about 7 mm. Overall we'll take 3 passes to go straight through. Important that the top remains fully supported with a sacrificial piece of MDF or an old work surface coming in below it, because when we go through on the final pass we will be just digging slightly into that surface, and that just means we've got a very smooth clean finish. So we'll drop this down by another 5-6 mm to complete the second pass. In between time, just get rid of some of the dust. In between each pass, just clear up. So we've completed the 3 passes. That takes us straight through the Mirostone, and we've just touched the sacrificial piece of MDF on the underside of it. That now leaves this so it's completely free, but as you can see it was fully supported. In doing this, whatever size piece you've got, whatever size the sink may be, please put that on one side, put it underneath the plinth, so you've got colour match material available in the unlikely event that a repair ever needs to be done. So we've now cut this piece of Mirostone to the size we wanted it. From this face, the only thing we've got left to do is to sand the inside of this. Because if we left this and we adhered the sink to it, then there's no way we could ever get in to finish that inside edge without damaging the sink itself. On the underside of it, we've already marked where we want the sink to be positioned. So, the sink goes back into position as that, and just to the side of it we need to drill the holes that will accept these brass inserts. Brass insert taps into the 7mm hole that we're going to drill. That 7mm hole is 12mm deep. Tap the insert into it. That's then ready, once they're all done, to have the washer put over the top of it and the bolt put in to tighten the stainless steel to the underside of the Mirostone. So 7mm drill bit, and we're going 12mm into the surface. So we drilled several positions around the sink, obviously dependent on the size of the sink, depends on the number that you put in. The packs that we supply come in packs of 20, so ample to cope with any size of undermount sink. 7mm hole, we then push into that the brass insert. They just simply push into each of them. As the bolt goes into them, it simply tightens up, and as a raw plug does, pushes out to the sides so it bites into the Mirostone itself to give that secure fixing. So with this section and on a piece of this size, what we've now done is we've pre-finished the inside of the sink area here, because on this we need to get the sink fastened to the underside of it before we pull the joint together, just as you would be doing in a complete kitchen. So using the relevant grades of sandpaper, the same as we would be using on the joint when that's gone off. But all we've done there is sand the inside of it through the various grades to bring it to this polished finish. So just to complete the installation of the stainless steel undermount, put a bead of silicone around the cutout, reposition the sink onto the top of it, press it down, and then just tighten the bolt into the brass insert that we drilled earlier. With these, no need to over tighten them. As the bolt goes into it, then the brass insert acts like a raw plug and just tightens, and you'll feel it just bite into the Mirostone itself. Then just go around and just complete the tightening of those, and that's your undermount completed. When we're preparing to complete a joint for an L-shape or a U-shape kitchen, we've got this section that's going to be joined on to here to form the L-shape. We've already trimmed this side of the cut. That side of it remains as a factory edge, which if you were to inspect this closely, what you will find is slight little serrations in the top edge of it, which means when we join this one onto it, it's not going to form a perfect joint. So we need to just skim this with the router to create a perfectly flat edge to it. And then on this section, from where this section joins onto it, we need to form a radius. We can't have it like that with a 90-degree corner, because if you have a 90-degree corner, that puts a stress into the material that potentially could cause it to crack. So this is an offset joint, so where this one joins onto it, it'll continue across in a straight line, and then it's got a minimum of a 12mm radius coming into that corner. It can be bigger than 12mm, but please don't go any less. So this section is simply, we've used a plunge saw, cut that away, just going to take that off with a jigsaw. we need to put biscuit joints in between these, 2 tops. That will help us with the levelling of it, and then it's ready to be glued up. We've got the joint to the point that we're happy now to bring it together. We've completed this section here, which when the 2 tops come together, we've got this corner block left in that we're going to form the radius on. So if we left it with a 90-degree corner, then that puts a stress into the material that could cause it to crack in the future. So when we bring it together, we'll be routing this corner and leaving a minimum of a 12mm radius coming onto it. The joint itself that we've prepared, we've skimmed both sides of it to bring it together, and we've put biscuits coming into it, which we've put 3 biscuits in across the width of the joint. When you bring this together, the biscuits help with the levelling process. Now, to ensure that it's a good joint when it's dry, as we pull it together, if we hadn't trimmed it properly and we ended up with a gap at the back but it's touching at the front, then that's not going to create an inconspicuous joint. What you'll actually see is a line of adhesive all the way through, and a customer that won't be happy with the end result. So we have to emphasise that you must keep checking this joint whilst it's dry. Pull it together, and as we bring that one together, pull it up tight, and that's a nice clean joint. If it's a joint in the way that that's completed, when it's dry, once we bring it all together with the adhesive coming into it and we clamp it up, it will give you a good joint that will be seamless and inconspicuous by the time it's all completed. So this is now prepared and ready for the joint to be completed. We've parted the joint now, we know it was a good joint whilst it was dry. Just a point that if you'd got any damage on your router cutter, if it was leaving a slight nick on the inside of it, all you do with that is 150 grit on a sanding block and actually just sand the inside of it, staying away from that top edge. It's critical that that top edge remains perfectly square, but if there was a nick in it, simply remove it with 150. What we'll do on the top where it's going to be jointed, we need to clamp in some way. If you've got them, you can always use suction clamps, but just to show an economical way of doing it, we're going to do it using some blocks of timber and some hot melt glue. So to help with the adhesion to the surface, then just simply roughen that top surface with 150 grit sandpaper. Remove the dust from it. And then we need to make sure that this is perfectly clean. So, using undyed, lint-free cloth with denatured alcohol. Wipe the top surface over and go along the joint, making sure that it's perfectly clean, any dust's been removed, and any pencil marks that may have been left on there have completely gone. If we don't do this, we can end up with a contaminated joint. So just for the sake of just a little bit of cleaning on there, that gives you some assurance that your joint's going to be absolutely fine, seamless and inconspicuous. Again, if someone was to come along and put their hand onto the top of it near the joint, then just go over it again, just to ensure that it's perfectly clean. Then with some hot melt glue, all we're going to do there is about 8 to 10 mil in from the edge. We'll simply glue blocks onto the top surface there that we can put a G-clamp across it. So the joint's now prepared, it's all cleaned off. We used the denatured alcohol, put the cartridge, which is colour matched to the work surface, into the applicator gun, and we simply dispense a nozzle's length of adhesive there. We do that because that ensures that it's thoroughly mixed within the tip. There's a helix in here and the two parts come together. We simply need to put bead of the adhesive all the way across the joint. Now, dependent on the temperature in the room, the adhesive can become a little bit runny, so it's obviously going to run down the face of the joint. But make sure we've got plenty on, so by the time we've finished, it actually leaves a full face of adhesive. So put that first one across, got the lamellos, just insert those. These are going to help with the levelling of the top as we pull it together. That's those in place, and then we simply slide that into position and leave the joint so it's about 1.5 to 2 mil away. And with your adhesive gone, again just put a final bead of adhesive across the top so it just starts to go down that joint, and this way we'll know that when we clamp it together we've got a full bead of adhesive all the way across that joint. And push that up. You can see that the adhesive line is close. Now most people, if you were doing this with a laminate work surface and colour fill or Spectra seal, you'd run your finger through the top of it to make sure that these are level. We can't do that, hence the use of the biscuits to help with the levelling process. If you run your finger through to check if it's level, what you'll actually do is contaminate the joints, and particularly if it was a white work surface, you'll end up with a dark line where you ran your finger through it. So just with the G-clamps then, put those into place and simply tighten those. Don't over tighten. The adhesive still needs to stay in that joint, can't squeeze it all out. The adhesive line by the time it's finished would be about 1/10 of a millimetre. Hence we come back with a seamless and inconspicuous joint. We can see across there now there's a full bead of adhesive. We don't need to do anything else to that, just leave it to cure. Dependent on the room conditions, it will take up to about an hour for that to be fully cured. What a lot of people do is do all the joints last thing at night and then don't touch them again till the next morning, by which time they know it is fully cured. Where we used the adhesive first of all, that we just expelled, we can see that that's now gone hard. The tip, each of the tubes of adhesive, 50mm adhesive, comes with 2 mixer tips. So if it is that we're only doing one joint, then we only need half the tube, and that's simply resealed, and you can use that for your next one, whether that be in the same kitchen or in a few months' time. So from that we know this is now fully cured, so we can remove the clamps and then just using a chisel just knock those away. As you can see, that hasn't caused any harm at all to the Mirostone. So having removed the G-clamps and the blocks that were adhered to the surface, we now need to just remove the excess glue. A quick way of doing that is simply by using a block plane, and in doing this you're just shaving the top of the adhesive, so we can fasten it down very quickly. As you can probably see, we've put a few scratches into the surface, but it's of no concern because from this we start to sand using 150 grit sandpaper. With the excess glue removed down to the surface, we now need to just make sure that we'll get rid of all of the glue. So we're now going to use a random orbital sander with a 150 grit sandpaper and start to sand that until we can see the glue line disappeared. To complete the offset corner, as we come onto the joint, what we've done in this instance, we've made a template that by using a router with a 12mm cutter and using the guide bush installed in there, that will follow the template round and leave us with a 12mm radius in the corner. If you'd got a router cutter with a top bearing that you wanted to use, then you could use a very simple template, which is simply cut at 90 degrees, a 24mm diameter cutter, which as that top bearing runs into it, that would automatically leave you with a 12mm radius. And we must have a minimum of a 12mm radius in the corner, because in doing that, it takes stress out of the material and prevents cracking. If you were to produce this with a 90-degree corner, it puts a stress in the material that potentially will cause cracks at some time in the future. Okay, so we've taken the template off around the corner. As you can see, it's left us with a 12mm radius coming into the corner. So it's an offset corner, which adds strength into that corner to help prevent any stress cracking in the future. So we'd finish this by removing all of the adhesive down to 150 grit. So to continue sanding now and to bring us to the finish that's required on the product, we now go through the grits of the sandpaper with 240, 320, finishing with 500 for the last of the sanding discs, and then we just do an over polish as we come to use the Scotch-Brite pad. On the front edge of it here, we've still got a very sharp edge from where we routed that corner, so we'll just break that corner with sandpaper as we go through the different grades to bring that top edge on the front edge to blend in with the sink area. Completed the sanding, we took it through all of the grades from the 150 to 240, 320, 500. We've gone over it with Scotch-Brite, which is the final one that we did with the sander. Last thing to do, which is found in the care and maintenance kit, is just to spray some solid surface polish onto the surface there. Simply rub that in with the cloth, wait for it to dry and then buff it up, and it leaves us with a nice shine for when your customer arrives home. All installation instructions, care and maintenance instructions can be found on the Mirostone or the Blackheath websites. So last thing on this one, we just need to position the tap. So in this instance, dependent on the installer or the consumer as to what they want, on a sink of this nature, it may be positioned slightly to the side, in the centre here, over on this side. There's no right or wrong in that, just depends on what's below it and getting the pipe work. So for that we need a 32mm drill. Dependent on the tap, just check on the manufacturer's tap that you're using. And to do that we're just using a standard hole saw. So it's got the pilot bit onto it, hole saw, and what we'll do, we'll take it part way through and then drill from the other side so we get no breakout coming onto it. So when we come to use an acrylic sink, this is simply adhered to the underside of the work surface using the same glue that we'd be using to make a seamless joint. You start by marking your cabinet on the insides of it, and then position your sink accordingly. So with this one, we position it within a 600 base unit in effect, and from there we simply mark the outside of the sink. Just a pencil line going around to show exactly where we're positioning this. Dependent on the size of the sink, you can actually put your hand through and mark the inside of it, bearing in mind that with acrylic sinks there is no such thing as a jig. Every one of these sinks is slightly different, so it's important that you work with the one that you have at that point. If it is that the bowl's too big and you can't mark the inside of it, then we've marked the outside. Just lift that up, measure the flange. Again, they're all slightly different. In this instance it's 30mm. So from where we've got the line here to the inside of the sink is 30mm. What we then need to do is to go inside of that, because we need to remove the excess material from the centre here. So by coming 6 to 8mm in, dependent on how good you are with a jigsaw, I know some people will go less than this, but you must use it with the jigsaw with no wobble on it, so it's a straight cut. What you can't afford to do is to undercut it, because if your blade bends and you continue on round, then I'm afraid you've just scrapped a work surface. So if you stay that bit further away from it, it just means you've got a little bit more work to do with the router, but that is all you've got to do. So we've got the outside line of the sink, we've now got the inside line of the sink, and now we come that 6 to 8mm inside of there. That's given us the cut line all the way through that we need to remove with the jigsaw. So to get the jigsaw through, we simply need to drill a 12mm hole to get it started. Whilst you're drilling that hole, again, it must be fully supported on the underside of it to prevent any breakout coming through. And from that, we need to put some supports underneath to ensure that we've got the sink cut out, the waste material fully supported. Now we've got the top in position, we've got supports underneath it to support the surface itself, and 2 additional ones coming where the cutout is going to become for the sink. So we make sure that that waste is, the waste material in the centre is always well supported. The concern becomes, as we get closer to the completed cutout, that it could simply snap and drop away. There's a lot of weight still left in that material. So starting from the 12mm hole, drop the jigsaw into place. We've got it so it's on a straight cut, no wobble coming into it. Let the jigsaw do the work, don't try and force it. Just because it's going later in the day, it really isn't worth it. An undercut here will cost you that work surface, which is an expensive mistake. So we've completed the cutout with the jigsaw. We just need to remove that section now. As you can see, it's remained fully supported, so it didn't drop away at the end of the cut. With this piece, again, put it on one side for use in the future. Should there ever be a damage, we've got colour match material on site available. So with the cutout completed, we've now repositioned the sink to where it should be going. To ensure that we get no further movement on this and it goes back into the same place every time, just with some hot melt glue going onto some scrap pieces of MDF or 2x1 or anything of that nature you've got to hand. Simply a little bit of adhesive going onto it and put, dependent on the size of the sink, 4-6 blocks around the outside of it, and then every time we lift this one out we know it's going back into the same position. We don't need to use a tape measure, we've got no more pencil marks or anything coming onto the surface. As if we leave pencil marks on, it will contaminate the glue. So once this glue's gone off, we'll remove the sink again, knowing it's going back in the same place, and we will remove any pencil marks at all from this surface. So the MDF blocks that we adhered to the underside of the work surface now guarantee whenever we remove this sink that it will go back into the same place. So just remove that, move it out of your way. We've still got pencil lines, and where the incline was going through with the batch colour and the sizes, that goes straight through the cutout. Very important that we just sand these with 150 grit to remove the ink to make sure there's no pencil marks left on it. If you don't, it will start to contaminate the joint. The adhesive that we're going to use is a 2-part adhesive, which is white to match the colour of the sink. It's never to match the colour of the work surface. All of the sinks are white, and therefore we use white to bond it to the underside of the surface. So the next step from here is simply with random orbital sander or with a block of sandpaper, simply to remove the pencil lines and the incline, and don't continue on until that's gone. So with the underside of it, again just with that 150 grit, just make sure that you've removed the ink and you've removed all pencil marks from around it. By using 150 grit, you're also making it slightly rough, so that helps with the adhesion of the sink to the underside of the surface. Then get rid of the dust as much as we can. Then to make sure it's really clean, everything to do with solid surface is about keeping it clean, keeping it dust free, keeping pencil marks away from it. So using an undyed lint free cloth, we then use denatured alcohol, which in putting this onto it, it removes any last remaining parts of the dust. It makes sure that any pencil marks are completely clear from the surface, otherwise we are risking that contamination. So take it down to the inside of it, make sure everything's nice and clean. If it were that somebody came along and decided to lean on your surface and put their hand inside it and on the top of it, it's some more denatured alcohol. Whilst your hands may look nice and clean, I'm afraid we've all got grease, and that's enough to contaminate a joint. Once we've done the cutout, then we go to the sink itself. And again, there, denatured alcohol around the top edge of the sink where it's going to be adhered to the underside of the work surface, taking it down to the inside of the bowl, so you're covering a good inch down on the inside, making sure it is absolutely clean. So we've cleaned everything off with the denatured alcohol. The adhesive we're going to use, just check the colour, bright white in this instance, so it matches in with the bowl of the sink. Load that into the gun, which it's not a silicone gun, it's a special gun, the 2-part adhesive, which you then remove the cap from it and put the nozzle into place. Within the nozzle, it's got a spiral running down the inside of it. So as you start to squeeze the adhesive out, then we know that that's thoroughly mixed. So So put a nozzle's length of adhesive onto a scrap piece of card, piece of timber, anything you've got lying around. That then we know is thoroughly mixed. If it isn't, then potentially it's not going to set, it's not going to cure. So from that we need to apply the adhesive to the edge where the sink's going to be adhered to, and we must make sure we've got plenty of adhesive coming onto this. What we can't do is actually see what's going on when we put the sink back onto it. Because we're working upside down, so plenty of adhesive coming round here to make sure we get good adhesion. Better to have too much than not enough. And then when we clamp this on, the bead of adhesive that's coming round it will simply squeeze out from the underside, and it will come out on the face of it, on the inside of the sink, and we'll see a little bit coming out, squeeze out, coming onto the back edge of this. To be 100% sure, you could actually just put a bead of adhesive around the inside of the sink here, top edge, just taking that round. Don't worry if any of it drips down to the inside of the sink, inside of the face of the sinks, because it's going to get sanded anyway, so that just isn't a problem. So from that, make sure you don't touch anything again. Tip the sink back over, and because we've got the MDF blocks on there, we know that's gone back into the right place. Looking through, there looks to have a full bead of adhesive coming from round it. Might be a touch at the moment. I can still get down to the underside, so just a touch more on there. Make sure that's pressed down. Just pressing it down though isn't enough to clamp it to the surface itself. So you can buy specialised clamps that will take to different sizes that you can put up then through the waste hole. All we're doing here, and it shows a budget way of using a clamp, a piece of MDF that's wider than the sink itself. Thread that through the waste hole. Piece of MDF over the top of it, a washer and a nut. And as we tighten that, that's going to tighten down and clamp that tightens down onto it. Doesn't need to be over tightened. Get it just so it's enough just to make it bite. You can see some squeeze out coming around the outside of the sink here. That should be the same as we go down onto the inside of it. If you put too much adhesive on it, you'll simply get more adhesive squeezing out. It doesn't matter. The critical part of it is that you've got enough in there. So we've had a few hours go by where we had the test piece of the glue. That's gone hard now, so it shows that's cured. This has been on for a couple of hours now, so that'll be fully cured. So the clamp can now be removed. the blocks of MDF that we put around the sides here to stop the sink moving. They've served their purpose now, don't need to be there anymore, so they can simply be removed. Put on one side, and that's the underside of the sink complete. Right, with the acrylic sink, it's now secured to the underside of the work surface using the two-part adhesive that was colour matched to the sink itself. As you put your hand around here, you can feel that we've got the 6 to 8 mil in places overhanging the bowl of the sink, and we now need to bring that so it's flush with the sides of the sink itself. So to do that, we're going to use a router. The router cutter that we're using on this occasion is simply a straight cut with a bottom bearing on it. So the bottom bearing is put in a position where it will actually be touching the side of the sink. So whatever shape that sink is, the bearing will actually follow it all the way round and leave us with a flush finish to the sink itself. Once we've done that and we've finished the routing, we simply go on to sanding the surface itself. When we come to the sanding of it, don't be concerned about sanding the bowl. The bowl's acrylic, the top's acrylic, and we're feathering them in together. So absolutely no problem with that. So we've now used the router with the bottom bearing just touching the edge of the sink, ran that all the way around the bowl of the sink, and that leaves us with now the Mirostone work surface in line with the edge of the sink. We just need to blend that in now simply by sanding, which is the next process we'll be doing. So we finished with the router cutter, which left us with the sides blended into the sink. We just need to finish that blend now by sanding. So using a random orbital sander, we can put that so it's on the edge of the sink and blending it into it. Don't worry about sanding the sink. The sink is acrylic in the same way as the top surface is, so it's always a sanded finish anyway. So we're using 150 grit sanding disc coming onto this on the flat sections of the sink. When you come into the corners, we need to finish that by hand. As yet, unfortunately, we haven't found a sander that can do the corners for us. We've completed the sink area. Now what we want to do is to put the drainer grooves in place. So we've set the jig in position, and you can put as many grooves into this as you choose. With this jig, we're putting them into straight lines. If you wanted to offset it, you could make them onto diagonal lines. Entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong in that. What we can't do is go any deeper than 6 mil into the surface at the deepest point. With this one, we've got a taper already built into the jig. So we're going from just a couple of mil at this end down to roughly 6 mil at that end. And we're going to put 6 drainer grooves routed into that top surface. We've routed the drainer grooves through. What we've used is a 19mm round bottom cutter. The reason for doing that is by the time you've rolled your sandpaper, the only way of sanding these is actually by hand. So with 150 grit, we start to sand. And this will remove any cutter marks. It doesn't take long to remove them. Making sure that we get straight through to the end there, and as you do this you'll naturally just scrape the top edge of the cut here, so it makes it slightly rounded on that top edge. Don't worry about scratching this top surface, it really doesn't matter because we've got to sand this yet anyway. And as we do the oversand, we'll be sanding the drainer groove, sanding around the top edge of the sink, and then we start at 150 grit, then we move forward onto 240, 320, finishing at 500. And we do that all over the surface now. So with the drainer grooves, we finished those. These are all done by hand. So we started with 150 grit and then worked our way through the grades up to a Scotch-Brite finish. So now to blend the whole thing together, all we need to do is using a random orbital sander on its polishing action, take us through 150, which will remove all of the scratch marks that we've got from where we were using the various tools on the surface. So we go over it with 150, then follow the different grits through to 240, 320, 500, and then we finish with a Scotch-Brite pad, which will be sanding the inside of the sink area into the corners, putting a slight break just on that top edge just to soften it, but that's all we need to do. So we've gone over the whole surface now, and we went through 150, 240, 320, 500 grit sandpaper, finishing it then with a random orbital sander on the top face using the Scotch-Brite pad. Around the corners we're using the Scotch-Brite pad, and the same on the drainer grooves. All of the sanding discs that you need, Scotch-Brite pad, are all supplied within the Mirostone installation kit. The final thing that we'll be doing, just to leave the customer with a nice shine on the surface, just spray a little bit of the polish. Again, it's supplied in the installation kit. So we spray a bit of polish onto there, wipe that onto the surface, give it a few seconds just to dry off, and then we simply buff it. Final part, once you've completed the installation, then there's a care and maintenance kit available. We suggest every installation has one of these left for the customer. It contains everything they need to look after their surface for many years to come, along with the installation leaflet as well. If it is that they need further information, then they should go to the Mirostone website. If we were cutting the Mirostone to accept an inset sink or a hob cutout, then what we need to do, and we're doing this just on a mini scale because it's so simple to do, so we simply mark where the hob would be going or the sink would be going for that cutout. We need to put in a minimum radius coming into the corner, so we're going to drill a 12mm hole in either of the corners, and then on this side of it we'll join it using the plunge saw, and then finish it with a jigsaw coming into the corner, and on the two cuts here we'll simply do those with a jigsaw to show the completed cutout. So just a 12mm hole coming into the corner. And as with the other drills that we've used, make sure you've got the sacrificial piece of MDF underneath to stop any breakout coming to the underside. We've completed the cutout and we've just taken a quarter section of it for this video demonstration. Once we've completed the cutout, 240 grit, and we're literally just sanding the inside of there just to take any ridges coming out of it and take any sharpness off it. Because on the hob cutout, which this is for, we've then got to put the aluminium tape around it to protect it from heat. So just on the top edge, just break the edge of it just using the sanding block, 240 grit, and that will simply help bend the aluminium foil over the corner. So once that's done, just remove the dust from it, because that will help with the aluminium foil to stick. Just make sure that's nice and clean, and that's ready for the foil to go onto it then to complete your hob cutout. For a hob cutout, normally from the inside of the hob cutout to the outside edge of where the hob's coming to, you've generally got somewhere between 5 and 8 mil, dependent on the manufacturer's guide. So once you've actually completed the cutout and you've sanded it, we just need to start adding the foil to it, which if you just neatly take that across the top edge, 5 to 6 mil across, follow it round into the corner. If you do tear it, don't worry about it, because when you overlap this, it really doesn't matter, and then you're just folding it down. And this gives the heat protection that it needs, particularly around the corners. So as we came along to the corner, foil broke at that point. Absolutely no problem with that. We simply overlap it, coming into the corner, and continue on along. Keeping it so with that 6 mil approximately onto the top edge, and leave the foil draped down below the thickness of the work surface. And that helps then to deflect the heat from the hob back down into the cabinet below. So with an inset sink, inset sinks are generally set with clips that will fit 30 or 40 mil thick worktops. We're working with a 20 mil product, so where the clips are situated, we need to thicken those up. This was done just with jigsaw in part and a plunge saw in the other areas. So all we've done there is literally just break the edge of it, taking the sharpness off the insides of it. If this was a standard work surface with a chipboard core, then you'd have to seal the chipboard itself to prevent moisture ingression. Obviously, this is solid surface, it's 100% waterproof, so there's no need to do anything else with that. Where the sink clips would be situated, then we've taken small pieces of Mirostone and we're simply going to adhere those where the clips would be situated. And we can do that either with solid surface adhesive, but that means there'd be a delay then because you're going to have to wait until the adhesive is cured before you can do anything else. Whereas if we use hot melt glue, which is as we're doing here, then that goes off within a matter of seconds and you'd be able then to continue on with the installation of your sink. So once the worktops are installed, there's a couple of ways of just finishing them. They can be left as they are, so the customer can then choose to put a tile down to it maybe, but more often than not we're finding that upstands are now being installed of the same material. So this is done with 12mm Mirostone. It's delivered to you 100mm high. Cut it to the length that you need, polish the ends of it, and then simply adhere it to the wall using a low modulus neutral pure clear silicone. That's bonded to the wall, not to the work surface. So the second option, rather than using an upstand, becomes the use of a splashback, which splashbacks are 760 high and they can be taken up to an extractor. So they can be used behind a hob, whether that be ceramic or induction with no problem at all. They can be used behind gas. You need to stay 140mm from the edge of the burner to the face of the splashback. If we were putting this one on, all we need to do is to put a bead of neutral cure silicone around the outside edges and then every 100mm down the length of the top. All you'd be then doing is simply lifting that, levelling it into position and pressing against the wall, so the silicone then bonds that to the wall.